Hey guys, welcome to episode 43 of The Green Life. Today's episode is all about communities, sharing, health, and we're going to talk about all these wonderful, juicy things with Nelson Campbell. Nelson is the CEO and president of PlantPure Inc., as well as the son of Dr. T. Colin Campbell, as well as the husband of Kim Campbell, who was here on the show last week. Before we dive into the episode, I just want to give Nama Well a big shout out for the J2 juicer, which you know I absolutely love. So I want you to fall in love with it too. So go into the show notes and grab 10% off. I also want to tell you that I have this wonderful holiday/retreat coming up in northern Portugal in May. And if you want more details about this one-in-a-lifetime opportunity to visit the north part of this country, go into the show notes as well. Check out all the details on my page and then reach out if you have any questions. I really hope to see you there. Okay, back to the episode. So we're going to talk to Nelson Campbell about all these wonderful things, community, PlantPure, and all the documentaries that he's worked on. Everybody might be familiar with PlantPure Nation, as he's the director of that, as well as the new documentary coming out soon, which is called From Food to Freedom. It's kind of a sequel, but it took a bit of a turn to a more personal story, which we're going to talk about a little bit into this episode. I just love the work that Nelson and his team do. It's a family business and it's a business of passion. So if you want to support, please go into the show notes, check out all the details of PlantPure and really try and see how you can get involved. Okay, without further ado, let's go into this episode with our guest. Welcome, Nelson. Hi, Nelson. Thank you so much for joining The Green Life today. How are you?
Pretty good. Yeah, it's I guess a lot of things going on in my life, but overall it's good. Every day is a good day.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're doing amazing work, which is what we're going to talk about today. Now, I don't think that a lot of people don't know who you are in the plant-based community, but I'm also reaching out to people that that haven't really embraced plant-based yet. And I want them to really understand the beauty of it, and the work that you've done has got a very appealing way to reach out to people that are not plant-based yet and really understand the impact on our health, but also nature. So should we just give people an introduction about who you are?
Sure. So I have been interested in this idea for quite some time, and I can blame that on my father, who's Dr. T. Colin Campbell, who did a lot of the pioneering research to validate the health benefits of this idea. So I've been plant-based since I was in my early 20s, and started making the transition even before then. I've done a lot of different things in my life, but for the last, let's say, 10 to 15 years, I've been working on a strategy that has led me to starting two organizations. One is a foods business, PlantPure, and the other is a nonprofit called PlantPure Communities. I also have produced a film called PlantPure Nation, which came out in 2015. In fact, the film was used to help launch those two organizations. And we're working together now on a strategy to help get the health and environmental ethical benefits of a plant-based diet deeper into the mainstream.
Perfect. Well, I had the pleasure of interviewing your father at the beginning of the podcast. Mm-hmm. It was the best interview. And I think it goes really well in tandem with what you just said and what you're doing and your mission, because one of the things that I really appreciate about Dr. Campbell and you, having seen your work, is that you do highlight that people have to take responsibility for their health, because sadly the system is not doing that. It's not really helping people. It's actually, follow the money, right? So sadly, it's looking at interest rather than people well-being. So in terms of PlantPure, I mean, obviously I'm familiar with PlantPure Nation as a documentary. I watched it when I had COVID in 2021. So I was just in bed for a few days, and so I was just watching all the documentaries, and I rewatched it, and that what really sparked the appeal of reaching out to Dr. Campbell as well. Mm-hmm. And I just reminded myself, wow, there is so much work that needs to be done, but it really needs to be done at grassroots. And I would like you to talk about PlantPure as the actual communities and the project, because I feel that that's exactly what it stems from and what it really stands for.
Yeah. So, this desire to take a more grassroots approach goes back many years. I'm the oldest of my siblings, and so I remember a lot of those years when my dad was doing his research and he was going through a lot of his challenges. And he would, come home and we'd always eat together at dinner around a big table. And he would share a lot of information about his work. And I remember him, being really frustrated with his efforts to share this health message with people in positions of power, in the government in Washington. And he had a lot of people attacking him and, a lot of challenges around that. But, going back to the 1990s and even 1980s, I saw him dealing with that pushback and the suppression of this information. So when I had a chance to do PlantPure Nation, I came up with a storyline that would help, through that story, demonstrate to people or explain to people how this message has been suppressed for so many years. And I've got a new film coming out, From Food to Freedom, where I'm doing that again, but in a different way. And so, I just concluded long ago from all of those experiences that we really do need to take more of a grassroots approach. We need to engage people in local communities to help share this message with their families and their friends and their coworkers. And and people will do that. We found that when people, shift to this lifestyle and they heal themselves, they just get so motivated and they want to share this with everyone around them. And so there's a powerful force there, and we need to figure out how to better motivate, support, organize, inspire people to do that. And I think that's going to be key to building a plant-based world, because it's not going to come from the top.
Yeah. And so actually, I want to talk about the documentaries a little bit more, but before that, what are the pods like? What are the communities like? How many do you have in the US? And are you also reaching out abroad? So say Europe. What does the demographic look like?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, we have these local groups. We call them pods because the idea is we're planting seeds of change in local communities. And we had a call to action at the end of our first film for people to start these groups and to join these groups. And people answered that call to action. And just prior to the pandemic, we estimated that we had about 250,000 people who were somehow connected to these pods. And we have pods all around the world. The majority of them are in the US, but we have pods in Asia and South Africa and the Middle East and Europe and Latin America. So we do have these spread out around the world. And the purpose of a pod, first and foremost, is to provide ongoing community support to people who are living plant-based, and also to introduce new people as well who come in who are curious about a plant-based diet. Typically, our pods will get together maybe once a month over a potluck. And people will come in and just visit and socialize. They each bring something and they'll post the recipe up on the wall. So there's always a recipe swap and people learning new recipes. So that's kind of the immediate function, but we also are trying to encourage pods to do things in their communities, to become more activist. And so that's part of our plan for the future. When the pandemic came, we did take a bit of a hit because people stopped meeting. So the pod network, kind of went into hibernation, but it's coming back now. So we're seeing a lot of people getting back together. In fact, just over the last 3 weeks or so, I asked our pod coordinator how many applications we had for new pods, and we had 8 in that short time frame. So it's still growing, and people seem to be getting a lot out of it.
Absolutely. I feel like this is something that I've been thinking about to actually implement in Portugal as well, because we are in the north, and it's a country that sadly is really rooted into the meat consumption, animal consumption, but also there's not a lot of animal welfare here or even knowledge about it. So they don't look at animals as sentient beings at all. And the laws are really not supporting the improvements that is needed here. So I find myself rescuing at the moment a lot of dogs, but we are looking to actually open a sanctuary to do more animals, or different animals. And to do that, we have to also see how can we inspire people? So I'm thinking about organizing conferences, but the pods would also work because there are a lot of people that are more, they're interested in taking action. It's happening more and more. It's more in the cities like Braga, Porto, Lisbon for sure. But, we can perhaps just grab more people from the countryside as well. I don't know if we're going to get the older generation are stuck in their ways, but, the new generation is the future. So maybe that's a good thing. So definitely, I think that the way the pods work are perfect way of introducing people to plant-based. And you also have a line of products that I talked to Kim about, so that she creates wonderfully. How does the logistics work for that? Because obviously in the US, it's easy to ship the products if the pods want to use them. But how does it work internationally?
Yeah, so that's tough. Because every country has their own labeling requirements, and I wish we just had one set of standards around the world and we could ship food. And for the bigger companies, that's not a problem because they have the capital to understand what those requirements are and to come up with packaging for each market. But we're small, so we don't have the capacity to do that. So right now, our food business is focused in the U.S., but I have dreams of being able to expand that overseas, particularly a new line that we've been working on, which is a dry pack line. I guess probably Kim had talked to you about that. That'll make it easy for people to live plant-based. But for us, our biggest issue has actually been funding and capital for both of our organizations. So, we have big ideas for what we want to do, but, it takes money. So right now we're trying to get the business to a profitable position. And we think we've got a good chance of that this year. And then that can help to sort of be an economic engine to support, some of the other things that we want to do. But unfortunately, money makes the world go round, and that's oftentimes why it's spinning in the wrong direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So actually, let's talk about the finance a little bit, because I think a lot of people are becoming more conscious about where they're investing their money. And, I know that traditionally investments are looked at having assets and a return that is immediate or at least short term. But we have to actually really realize that in this economic environment, our investments need to be long term, because eventually, if we are investing in projects like yours, we're actually looking at the impact that it has on nature, that it has on our planet, and therefore we're creating this circular economy that is separated from these big corporations which have run the world for a long time, as you said. So in which way can people actually support, so that whilst they're actually creating the pods, while they may be doing the communities, while they may be watching the documentaries, they can also support your business and into growing? Because I feel like we need to put our money where our mouth is, quite literally at this point, but also actually become conscious spenders. I don't like the word consumers, because we don't, it's not about consuming, it's not about getting things we don't need, but actually really investing into things that will add value to our lives and our future generations' lives. So yeah, if you can talk about ways that us, people that are listening to this podcast, can actually support you.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do have a couple of websites that people can go to. One is PlantPureNation.com, which is for the foods business. I will say that site is getting completely revamped. So we've got an old product line up there that has been phased out. So that's going to be replaced soon with information on the new product line. But there's a contact us button there for folks who might be interested in the foods business. And then we have a website for the nonprofit, which is plantpurecommunities.org, plantpurecommunities.org. And again, there's a contact button there as well. So I would just encourage folks, if they have an interest in that, to contact us.
Brilliant. Now let's go back to documentaries. We are not going to talk too much about the new one. I'm following instructions, but I do want to be transparent to the fact that you allowed me to watch it, and I absolutely loved it. And one of the things that to me really popped was the first one was, as we mentioned before, an awareness of the system and really exposing what your father had faced in his journey. The second one is a lot more personal, and it goes back to the points we made earlier. Take responsibility, because ultimately your health, your job to do it, to look after it. So what inspired you to kind of tandem into that direction when you did the second documentary? Because I would have expected, when you mentioned that you were working on something else, that it would have been kind of like the first one, attempting to go and change policies again and trying to get the politicians to listen and do some work towards helping people have access to these kind of foods. So what steered you to another direction that is more personal than the first one?
Yeah, and I will share some tidbits on the second film. I just won't give away too much. It's kind of like, our trailer. We give away enough to get people excited to want to come watch it, but I can share a little bit about it. So, first of all, I should mention that the project that we feature, the story that we tell in the film, it's a story of a 10-day live-in immersion with a group of people who have type 2 diabetes. That project, which took place in Greensboro, North Carolina, was supposed to be the first chapter of a bigger story that we were going to drive in New York City with a healthcare partner up there to launch a big campaign. But that didn't work because there were internal politics that developed in that other organization. And I won't go into the details, or certainly won't smear anyone, but I'll just say, it has a lot to do with some of the macroeconomic factors that I've addressed elsewhere. But anyways, that didn't work out. So we filmed this project in Greensboro. And so then what we decided is well, let's turn that into a movie. And it kind of made sense because, first of all, I had always wanted to do a project like that, a live-in immersion with people who, had these serious conditions, and to demonstrate how we could heal those people quickly. But I thought it was especially relevant to do that today because of the pandemic. Mm. And, you can make larger arguments about food and nutrition, immunity, pandemic, some of the lack of communication that occurred during the pandemic around this idea. You can use experts and talking heads in a film to make those points, or you can use the kind of story that we created to make those points. And I think the story is actually a lot more powerful. But, we followed these people through the program, and I'll just say, that we do get some good results. And we use that as a springboard to make larger points about food and chronic disease and immunity and the way that we responded in the pandemic and the failure to get to communicate this information to the public. By the way, we don't get into divisive issues like, masking and shutdowns and vaccinations. We only note that some of that was the standard response, but we don't render an opinion on any of that because we want to keep the focus on the food.
Yeah, and at this point, as you said, it's very divisive. And even now that, we have experiences, it is still the way it is. People have chosen something, and it's very hard to look back and have more of a detached kind of opinion on things. I'm trying to be very diplomatic with my language, but so let's just say that you hit the nail on its head, though, because one of the things that nobody talked about when all this happened is nutrition. How are you feeding yourself, and how many people were affected that had comorbidities, and what does that even mean? That's the thing. Like we just had this fear going around, and nobody took responsibility because they didn't know they could. And instead, what happened is everybody was locked away at home, eating poor diets, for comfort, and because food became their only friend. Some of them didn't even have a family to be with, so your burger is your bestie at that point. And over time, I mean, a lot of people I know gained so much weight throughout the pandemic because they just didn't move, didn't have good nutrition, didn't have the right mindset. That takes a toll, and that obviously has a ripple effect on our health later. And none of the talking heads that we're talking about mentioned at once, how important nutrition is. So that's very frustrating because it's just, you don't care for people, like you just want them to get sicker. So that's
yeah. Well, as you saw in the film, one of the statistics that we cited, and it's one that became known early in the pandemic during the initial surge in Italy. A study was commissioned, and they found that 99.some% of the people who were dying had pre-existing conditions, mostly chronic conditions like diabetes and heart disease and hypertension. And in the United States, up to there's some gray area here, but up to about 40% of the people who died from COVID here had diabetes, mostly type 2 diabetes.
Yeah.
And so, we demonstrate in the film how these conditions reverse, not within months or years, but days. And yet, on the website that the U.S. kind of the kind of the gold standard recommendations that were made by the U.S. CDC didn't even include the word nutrition. And, even those folks, they may not be as fully informed as, say, my father is on the power of diet, but they understand the connection between food and chronic conditions and the connection of those conditions to outcomes of COVID. And to not even include the word nutrition in that list of recommendations, I mean, what is that? That's just like the culmination of the big lie that's been going on for decades now. And it's why we need to take a different approach. We need to get this word out to people directly and take more of a grassroots approach to sharing this message.
Yeah, absolutely. So I saw that Dr. Campbell is lightly featured in the documentary, but how, I know that it's not working full time anymore, but he's still quite active and he's still very involved into the decision making of, the course. And I know you mentioned your sister is an activist, she's also working at grassroots. I believe last time I talked to your father, she was in Dominican Republic. I don't know if that's still the case. Yeah. So how does it all come together for Dr. Campbell as well, when you guys get together and you think about, what can we do next? How can we really empower people more and more? Because now we have the documentaries, the pods, the course, and I know they're different businesses separate from each other, but some of them. But how do they all come together? Because this seems like a family business, which is actually nice because everybody is joining forces to kind of share this, vision.
Yeah, I would say that, we're each working on different aspects of a solution. So, we actually don't do a lot with my sister's organization, Center for Nutrition Studies. They've kind of got their thing that their strategy, which they're pursuing. We're doing something a little different with respect to media and this pod network. And going forward for us, media is going to be a big focus of ours. We're going to put more into that. We have another documentary concept that we've come up with, if I can get the funding to do it. And then we want to produce short content that we can stream out that highlight inspiring things that are happening at the grassroots level, so that we can learn from each other and we can replicate successes. So that's going to be sort of our part of it, is focusing on the media and the grassroots. And CNS's, they have their plant-based certificate program, which we don't have anything like that, so they put a lot of focus on that. My father continues to engage in debate, with other researchers and trying to share his science and research ideas. So we're each kind of working on, different parts of a total solution.
I love that. The family legacy. So actually, I need to ask about your family legacy then. You said you went plant-based in your 20s. How long did it take you to actually move into a plant-based lifestyle after your father started sharing his research? Because I don't, sometimes, especially when in our own homes, we don't necessarily listen to our parents or our siblings or family members that come up with discoveries, because we take them for granted in a way. And I know when your parents changed their lifestyle because of the finding of your father, did you embrace it straight away, or did you actually have resistance because now you had been living an omnivorous lifestyle for part of your life already? What was your approach with that?
Well, we actually started making changes when I was in my teens.
Okay.
And so, I really became a lot stricter about it in my early 20s. And then even then it was an evolution. So you start with some of the junk food products and you get better and better as you move toward a whole food plant-based diet. But when my dad came home with this information, we never really pushed back. I mean, we just accepted it. And I was always fascinated by his work. And I wasn't all that rebellious, but then I think my siblings also were pretty accepting of it too. One of the things that he did really well is he would, like I said, we'd always eat together and sit around a big table, and he and my mom always helped facilitate, interesting discussions. And so during that. And some of my greatest learning, happened through that. That's why we should eat together, by the way. I don't know what's happened in our modern world. We all get our food and go eat by ourselves, or eat at different times, or eat in front of the TV. But, especially if there are kids in the house, we should be eating together and sharing knowledge and having conversations. And that's what we did in our house. So we always, we were sort of vested in my dad's research because we understood what he was doing and kind of following along and respected it. So we never rebelled against it.
Yeah, that's good. I love that. I love what you said about, eating together. It's so true. The fundamentals of family lives are being slightly lost, with children being nannied by technology and being pulled away from the family nucleus, as well as the attack on the family life by forcing parents to work longer hours and not have that kind of continuum. The mothers are not at home anymore as much. They have to work, and it's very complicated as a subject. It's very big as a subject. This is something I appreciate about Europe. Being here, noticing that although women do work, they take finishing on time at work very seriously. I remember when I worked in London, I used to be a banker. My contract hours meant nothing, because sometimes we had to start at 7 o'clock in the morning and then finish 11 o'clock at night if we had projects, and there was like nothing you could do about it because the delivery was the delivery of those deadlines. And you can't have a normal life, which is why I never wanted to get to have children in London. Well, I didn't have them here either, but that was the reason why I never really wanted to have a family in that environment. And I saw a lot of women struggling, especially my colleagues who had children and they could not be at home for dinner. And I think that is taking people away from eating real food to begin with. Never mind the plant-based, education approach, but actually eating real food. Now we're going to the convenient food that is full of junk that you find in your freezer. So people are getting used to these conveniences, but also getting sicker. And then it becomes this very vicious cycle. And this is actually one great thing that you guys are doing with these food options that are quick, but also healthy. They don't have the junk that you would find in most commercial products. And I think in the reality is people want convenience. So it's a balance between cook real food from scratch, but also help yourself with little tricks that maybe facilitate your time management by having access to things that are healthier rather than, the junk again. So That's powerful, and I really hope that those products grow strongly, that you can get them in supermarkets, you can get them everywhere that they should be in people's faces, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
that's
I think what we found is over the years, and of course, a lot of other people understand this as well, the things that are most important to helping people sustain their commitment to the lifestyle is, food, affordable, healthy, convenient food options, which actually we're still lacking. The big wave of plant-based products that came out onto the market were all the fake meat products and the cheeses and the fake eggs and the mayonnaise and all of that. We still are lacking, those affordable whole food plant-based options. But that's important. The second thing that's important is that social support, which we already talked about with the pods. But the third thing that's really important, and this is a deep one, and it's what you were just referencing, it's the stressors that affect us. And we do talk about this some in our film. We catch up with the people who were in the immersion. And so, we have a kind of a mixed bag of results. And, we see that there are life stresses that can make it very difficult for people. And so we have to figure out, well, where did those stresses come from? And that's a deep thing, I personally think it has a lot to do with our lack of connection to one another, our social connection, and our obsession with oftentimes with work that's not meaningful. And, to oftentimes we're trading away the social connection for that work. And, I think I always remember, and I've told the story so many times, you probably heard me say this in other podcasts, but it's one of those things that I always remember. And that is, my dad, he was going through a lot of pushback, and, it was getting so bad that I think he was seriously entertaining the idea of just sort of quitting and dropping out. And because he just could hardly take it anymore. And so we were sitting around the table, and he said, how would you all feel if I left my position and, maybe we didn't have some income for a while, and we ended up living in a trailer. And, we all thought we were kids, and we all thought that was a great idea because we could all share the same bedroom and bounce off the walls. But that's just one of those questions sometimes I think we need to ask is it worth it? Is this lifestyle we're living worth it? Is it worth the stress and these perks and, the additional car and the technology, is it worth it? So
I think, as we said before, it's about moving away from consumerism and actually understanding where you're investing, and what is necessary versus what is just frivolous. Something that came from the documentary, I think we can talk about it because it's not per se in the documentary, but one of the lessons learned is one of the people that was in the immersion kept on making references to how expensive it was to access insulin. And people, I think, take it for granted that if you are sick, it's not just your Medicare aid. I mean, I know the US is a very different system from Canada and UK and most of European countries where it's social health. But they still, like, even if you have Medicare, you still have to pay extra for medication, which in a case like, people with type 2 diabetes that can reverse it or make it better, it's interesting because we focus on how expensive it is to eat healthy, which doesn't have to be, as we know, but like we're spending so much more money to get drugs. So I'm sure that conversation came up into the filming, because I'm sure not all the conversations were actually captured in the documentary. How was that approached? What was the goodness that you were sharing, the wisdom that you were sharing with the participant about managing their costs and understanding that, maybe investing more in food would be better than investing into medicine that doesn't necessarily make them healthier and doesn't necessarily make them feel better?
Yeah. Well, certainly, we talked about the idea of the cost of drugs. And of course, as you saw in the film, some of the participants shared those concerns as well and how they'd been impacted. So we did have those discussions. the one discussion that I think emerged that was really exciting to me, and it's embedded in the title of the film, From Food to Freedom, is this idea that we have the power to take responsibility for our health. We can, if we take responsibility, we can largely control our health. And what does that decision to take responsibility lead to? It leads to lower costs, reduced burdens, and greater freedom overall. And, this is something that we don't talk a lot about. It's almost politically incorrect because, when we talk about this idea of taking responsibility, that idea, it does sort of trigger some people in a negative way, because for reasons that we identify in our film, it is very hard for people sometimes to take responsibility. People have all kinds of financial and economic and other stresses that they deal with in their life. And we all have to admit that when we're feeling that way, when we're under stress, oftentimes you don't want to take responsibility. That's actually when you feel the most self-destructive. Mm-hmm. And so it's unreasonable to assume that everyone can just magically make a decision to take responsibility. So I understand that when people sort of react that way and want to push back against the idea, but the idea of taking responsibility is not the problem. The problem is what can we as a society do to help make it easier for people to take responsibility, to message, to give people the proper messages and the proper support. But this act of taking responsibility is so empowering, and it is the pathway to freedom, and not just with respect to our health, but every other aspect of our lives. Personal responsibility is almost a prerequisite to freedom, and so we kind of make that point in the film.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Sorry, the other phone is ringing.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So you talked about the challenges that can arise from obviously this path. Your father faced it, whether it was through, against the system, or it was with colleagues, and so social life. You are facing more challenges in a different way now. People are more open to plant-based, but of course it's hard to raise funds to do projects that are bigger and more impactful. But you mentioned also living a life with purpose. Sometimes we have jobs that we really hate, and then our life is just wasted away like that. And I can definitely speak for that. When I left banking, it was the happiest day of my life, and I just knew that I wasn't fulfilling a purpose. That was my path. I was just ticking boxes, making my parents proud, making good money, and then not really living life. So even with the challenges that you face every day, what is the most empowering thing about your journey? And what is, like, if you had to look back and talk to younger Nelson, what would you tell yourself? You've done it. Like, what would be your best achievement, the thing you're most proud of?
First of all, with hindsight, there are things I would have done differently strategically. So, one of the things that we did, and I'm happy to admit this because I'm always reflecting back on my past, and I think humility is the key to learning and getting better at what you do. But we made an early commitment to a foods business, that was focused on just very, very healthy products. And that's turned out to be very difficult. I think we were ahead of our time. I don't think that the market was ready for that, and that's been a real point of stress and challenge for us. And I'm not sure I would have focused as much on building a foods business if I had to do it over again. But in terms of what I've most enjoyed, I've most enjoyed communicating ideas to people, ideas that I think can help them see a bigger picture, maybe give them some inspiration that they can incorporate into their lives. So I've enjoyed making the films, our two films. I really, really like that. And I want to do more of that in the future. I want to do more communicating. I like connecting with people through ideas. I don't have any interest in building, superficial things like brands and celebrity, and I actually try to shy away from that. But I do enjoy connecting to people through ideas that are meaningful, that I hope are meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always feel that the best way to expand beautiful ideas is finding like-minded people. And I think you're doing that. It might take a little bit of time because we certainly are influencers and celebrity obsessed as a society, but it's really melting away, which is why I feel like celebrities are trying to be more on Instagram and on TikTok because they really are irrelevant. And the things that matter are the things that stick. So I think what you're doing is fantastic. And I know you're pressed for time. So I really want to say I appreciate every single moment you gave me and single thing you do outside your working hours. I'm sure you think about everything you want to do in your sleep. So I know how that is. The passion comes through. And I just want to say I appreciate it. And I know a lot of people are very grateful for your work. So thank you. Well,
thank you, Chantal, for your work as well in this field, and doing a podcast like this and helping to share this information. And so thank you for all you. It's going to take millions of people working together to make this happen. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here, and I will speak to you very, very soon, and you'll continue to get our support and my support for sure. So yeah, thank you again.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Nelson, and thank you everyone for staying on for this episode. I hope that although we had a very short time because Nelson is super busy, you got a lot out of it. And also, you learned more about PlantPure and all the wonderful work that the communities do, that the films do. So go check out the show notes for every little bit of details about these journeys, these businesses, and how you can get involved and support. If we need to change the world, if we want to change the world, we need to start taking steps towards it. Disease is something that we can mostly prevent. So why not do it? Why not understand how to take care of our bodies? Why not create communities and support? And why not invest in our future? Okay, guys, I will see you next week here on the show. And as always, please do like, share, review the podcast so we can keep on growing. I'll see you then. Bye.